Welcome back to the Mic Check Podcast. This is your co-host, Quentin Lilly, a.k.a. Right on Cue. As you guys know me on social media. Thank you guys again for joining and welcome everybody back to another wonderful show. Before we go ahead and get things started and introduce our wonderful guest tonight, I want to go ahead and remind everybody to like, share, and subscribe this video, our YouTube channel. You can find all of our social media tags down in the box on the bottom left below. Please make sure that you hit those as well. We definitely appreciate the support and the continued feedback as always. Now we'll go ahead and get into the show. I have a really great show planned. We're going to go ahead and welcome my guest, man, Josh Sullivan, one of my former co-workers. He and I got started a long time ago, just about 8 years ago now, in the sports journalism world together as co-workers. And we've had a lot of time to kind of grow and kind of mark our own paths. But Josh, welcome onto the show, man. Really happy to have you on.
Thank you for having me. It's like we haven't missed a beat. We're back like old times. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. And Josh is actually talking about a audio podcast that T, myself, and Josh from time to time used to do back in 2016 when we were just in our SoundCloud days. So technology has advanced, we have advanced, and here we are in the flesh on video, able to do something wonderful on a great platform through StreamYard. So we really appreciate everybody that's joining. Josh, why don't you tell me a little bit about the first recollection you have about when we actually got to meet? This is a great question I always like to start with all my guests.
Yeah, I remember we moved pretty much right about the same time to Killeen, and I remember I hadn't met you yet, and I was getting ready to move, and my dad had come down with me, and he was like, "Didn't you say there's someone named Quentin that's starting the same time as you? He's roughly your same age." I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "You should ask him to help you move." I was like, "There's no way. I haven't met this dude. There's no way I'm just gonna be like, 'What's up, man? You want to help me move into my apartment? I just met you,'" and then like we met, went through all the stuff you do that you have to do when you start a new job, and we were talking about football, and you were like, "You know what? Why don't you come over tonight? Why don't you go come by my place and watch the game?" And it's started a real long friendship and a couple podcasts and a lot of stuff. I was at your wedding last year, and now we're here today.
Absolutely, man. So Josh and I go back a long ways, and a great friend of mine, a great resource of mine. We've gone through a lot of the similar things that we've had to go through in our careers, transitioning all across the country. Josh is originally from Boston. I'm from LA, right? So there's going to be the opposite dynamics, but maybe opposites attract because we are great friends and we really do get along pretty well there. So we're going to go ahead and start, man. And ironically, the first two topics we're going to talk about is Josh's hometown team as well as my hometown team when we talk about the Boston Celtics, who are actually, as we record this podcast, for everybody that's going to see this podcast, it's probably going to be after the game is already over. So if there's anything that we give away here, it's going to be mindful that we didn't know the result of game one. What's your thoughts, man, on the Boston Celtics run overall in the playoffs so far? And what are your thoughts on how they're going to be able to match up with the Miami Heat, who have really hit their stride in the last two playoff rounds?
I mean, as we speak right now, it's a 1-point game. And I think that's exactly the way the whole series is going to go. Like, I would be shocked if this doesn't go 7 games. And I was thinking about it, and I'm going to touch upon this a little bit too when we talk about the Lakers. But it gets to a point, I think, with the NBA playoffs where there's so much the Nuggets are really, really making a run. That's been cool. We saw it with the Grizzlies, how they've got this really young team, and they're playing this kind of new type of basketball, this run and gun type of basketball. But I don't know, the way we've seen it in the NBA, if you've established yourself as a franchise, that just goes so much further in these types of games. Look, the Celtics, everyone, if you were to ask anyone October, November, December, they were going to sweep every single playoff series on their way to their 18th title, right? That's the way they were playing, and everything was going well for them when that was happening. And there's been a couple injuries. Jaylen Brown's going to stop gardening in his home. Maybe ease up on hand injuries, but they were tested a ton by Atlanta. They were, I mean, look, the Hawks exposed a lot of things that they didn't do well. and they took them to 7, and rightfully so. Like that Atlanta team, I think, played a little bit out of their mind as far as like their overall like skill level, and Boston kind of lollygagged around a little bit in the beginning, but I think the real thing for me that showed me like this team has what it takes to get to the NBA Finals, maybe take it this next step and maybe win another title, is like in that Game 7, there was a moment just where it was a real close game. They might have been down by 2 or 3, and you knew they had to. It wasn't like a do or die situation. It's not like they were down by 10 or 12 or anything, but you knew that they had to start doing everything perfectly in order to kind of figure things out. And when that happened, it was, okay, you got Jason Tatum going up and grabbing rebounds. You've got Al Horford playing out of his mind on defense. He's throwing blocks around. There's one sequence where I think like Atlanta couldn't get a shot off. Al Horford blocked like 2 or 3 out of like 4 or 5 different attempts. It was crazy. And that one sequence just kind of like reassured a lot of people who are Boston fans, but I know definitely reassured myself, where it was like, oh, okay, yeah, this team has it. Like they know what to do. They've got a lot of experience. All these young guys have really like been there before. They've lost, whether it be in the conference finals to a team like Miami, or whether it was in the NBA Finals last year to Golden State. And that kind of showed when they got down against Philadelphia, against the MVP. Like Embiid, I know we can get into that. He did not really like show up the way he needed to. But like Maxey and other guys for Philly were shooting the lights out, and the Celtics were really able to adjust, I think, and like buckle down on defense. That game where Jason Tatum did not score more than I think 1 point in the first quarter at all. Like he was still very, very relevant out there on defense. And like, that's the kind of way they got to play. Like if one thing's not going your way, it's like, all right, buckle down, do something else I can do to kind of step up. So all that being said, I think this is going to go 7. I think it's going to be an absolute dogfight, especially because of the history that Miami and the Celtics have. Like that does go a long way in these series, but I'm not going to pick against Boston.
No, and I wouldn't either. I think in this series, man, I think really what it's going to come down to for me is how well, and it's kind of a basic answer, right? But how many great to close to great games are you going to get out of Jason Tatum? For everybody that's a Boston Celtics fan, they'll know all of the ups and downs that Tatum has had throughout the playoffs so far. They'll understand the fact that, he's had some really bad halves of games. He's had some really bad starts to games. Luckily, in the last 2 games against Philadelphia, he was able to close those games strong. I mean, the last game he had 51, so that was an awesome game. But the 2 games prior to that, he had a 7-point game in there when they were able to win without needing him. But he had a game in there where he was 1 for 13 before he hit a final, I think, 5 shots to close out that game 6, I believe it was. And so, all of those moments come back to haunt you if it's against a team that's going to be disciplined, that's going to not make mistakes, that's going to put you in pressurized situations. And that's exactly what the Miami Heat are. Ironically, I think that if the Miami Heat are able to get dethroned by the Celtics in this series, I think what this does do is it prepares them for what they will face when they're able to move into another finals series again this year after being in the finals last year. If they're able to play a team like LA, a rough, strong defensive team, a team that's well coached with a lot of smart players, that's exactly who Miami is. So if they're able to fend off Miami from that aspect and get this series win, I think it's a great preparation for what they'll face in the finals. And Jason Tatum just has to be more consistent. I think that he probably takes a few too many threes, in my opinion. He is a very good shooter, and he's a streaky shooter at that. So when he gets hot, he can really knock down a lot of shots in bunches. But I think if he's able to mix up his game by getting to the free throw line and getting to the rim more often, I think that the Celtics have a great chance to win this series. And if I'm going to go ahead and pick them, I'm picking them in 6. I'm picking them to win this game in 6 games. I think that they probably don't win either of the 2 games in Miami, but I think they're able to hold home court and then steal the last road game in Miami in Game 6. What's your pick for that series, man?
I mean, I'm going Celtics in 7. Like I'm terrified of Jimmy Butler. Like he was one shot away from taking it from the Celtics last year, really. And so my big key to the game, I want Horford to keep playing defense and keep playing like above the rim like he's been playing. He's playing like with absolute dad energy right now, and it's been great. And then I personally would love it if Marcus Smart was not the guy to take the last shot. I love him. I love the dude so much. He like exemplifies everything it means to be a Boston athlete. But like when he is on the floor, there's very rarely a chance that he's not the 5th best shooter on his team. And so like, dude, just give it to White, give it to Brogdon, give it to Grant Williams, give it to almost anyone else.
Right, naturally. So we're going to go ahead and transition now because we've talked about the Eastern Conference Series finals. That's going to be a great series no matter who you think, Josh or I are right. We both agree that it's going to be a long and a back-and-forth series that's going to be hotly contested. But we're going to go ahead and move over to the Western Conference, and we have a little bit better clarity with the Western Conference because we were able to see Game 1 last night, 2 nights ago, for all of my folks that are going to watch this the day that we go ahead and publish this, which would have been Tuesday night, where the Lakers really had a slow start to that game. And they made a comeback towards the end of the third quarter and start of the fourth quarter, where they were able to kind of change up some things in the second half. They just fell a little bit short by some mental mistakes that they made at the end of the game. What were your thoughts on that game as a whole? And then what do you think we'll see the rest of the series moving forward from both the Lakers and the Nuggets?
I mean, I will be one of the first people to admit that I did not expect, and I'm probably not alone, but I did not expect the Lakers to be in this position at all. But once they won that play-in game, you were kind of like, all right, they're cooking with a little something special. Like maybe it's kind of I hate to compare sports because it's like not really fair a lot of times, but like you see it in baseball a lot of times where like the wild card team, they just kind of get hot at the right time, and then they're winning the wild card game, or they're like winning that first round, and you're like, okay. I mean, you saw it with the Heat too. Like I think that legitimately halfway through the year, like Christmas time, if you were to tell me the Lakers had a chance to go to the final, I would have told you were crazy. Especially the fact that like they're making the adjustments to the roster that they did. I will say, like, what we saw in the Grizzlies series is that like LeBron, while he might not be able to play with like the consistency of his intensity like he used to, like when he decides he just needs to turn it on, he's really, really able to, which is kind of crazy to me when you think about it. The dude's 38, right?
Yeah.
Like I know he's one of the best athletes of any sport of all time. Like, but it still is absolutely mind-blowing to me that you can just go down, you can get smack talked by like a player who's so far beneath you, and then you decide, all right, well, I'm just going to go on a little run and I mean, I don't think this is going to go less than 6 games. I am going to pick LA, and it's for the simple reason that in my brain, there's no way Denver, as good as Jokic is, as good as this team has been, it just breaks my brain to think that a Denver Nuggets team can beat the LA Lakers in the conference finals. Like I don't know why, but I do not think they can do it.
Yeah. Well, for some reasons, I think that you may be alluding to in, your hesitancy to believe in them is that the Nuggets, in every single opportunity that they had, when it's been Jamal Murray and Jokic playing together, there's been some kind of a fold or a meltdown at some point. Whether you're talking about in the bubble, when they lost, to the Lakers in this same exact round on the Lakers' way to a championship back in 2020. Whether you're talking about I believe it was their second round loss to the Warriors just 2 years ago, or actually last year, excuse me. So, you're talking about a team that has not proven themselves at the highest level. They've been the number 1 seed in the Western Conference now all season long, pretty much. Wire to wire, they've been the number 1 team pretty much, really since Christmas. But there's always going to be hesitancy when you're talking about a historically great player with another possibly historically great player with a franchise that is known for winning. And let's face it, I mean, the Nuggets really have never won anything in the NBA. I mean, you'd have to go back to the 70s to really see any consistency from the Denver Nuggets when it comes to winning. And they certainly have not been a championship contending team for long periods of time. So it remains to be seen for them. But I think the key in this series is really going to come down to how well Denver is able to shoot the ball, because Denver shot the ball extremely, extremely well. I'm going to go ahead and pull those numbers right now just so that we can get a little bit of perspective on it, because this game actually did go ahead and already happen. So let me see here. So the Nuggets shot 15 for 32 from three-point range. I mean, if they're going to shoot 46% from three the entire series, the Lakers are in some trouble. But as a Laker fan myself, I feel comfortable in knowing that the defense that the Lakers are able to play on a consistent basis, that's not something they're going to be able to continue. You can look at the Warriors series as a great example that they're a team that got hot for 2 or 3 games, and they, eventually came back to earth, so to speak. So if the Warriors are going to have some up and downs when it comes to shooting, I'm certainly going to expect that from the Denver Nuggets. There was one thing that I want everybody to watch out for that was actually a very interesting adjustment that the Lakers made. Darvin Ham decided to keep Rui Hachimura in the game in the second half, and he decided to make him the primary defender on Jokic in the fourth quarter. And while the Lakers were making their run, Jokic was going 1 for 5 from the field. He only had 2 points, no free throws until the final 2 minutes. And Rui really did a great job on him, which allowed Anthony Davis to kind of roam the paint, block shots, and not have to have so much pressure on him to have to be the primary defender on Jokic for all 40 or 45 minutes that he was going to go ahead and play. If the Lakers come out with that again in game 2, you've got to know that they're going to do something differently than they did in the fourth quarter to try to get him off of him, to try to get Rui off of him, to try to get Rui moving through screens. So it will remain to be seen how well they're able to go ahead and adjust to that, because I think that that's going to be the key moving forward. Excuse me. So if I had to go ahead and pick, and I'll let you go ahead and go first, actually, since I went first last time, what's your pick for this series, and who do you think wins and how many games?
I'm gonna say Lakers in 6.
Lakers in 6. Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with you there. I have the Lakers winning this game, or this series, in 6 games. And I do have them winning a key game, because if they don't win game 2, then we are really, really in some trouble. I think if they win game 2, I feel really good if I'm a Lakers fan, and I feel really good as a Lakers player if I'm on that team to know that, okay, we got the split we needed. We came back from a blowout win that they should have had by cutting a 21-point deficit in the final minutes of game 1. We're going to go back home where we're undefeated. We haven't lost at home yet. We take care of our business at home, and we have a great chance to close this thing out in 6 games on our home floor and go back to the finals. So from the Lakers, we'll go ahead and transition now into some interesting news that's come out in the last week. I think it's just now been just over a week. It's official that Bronny James, LeBron James Jr., has gone ahead and made his commitment, saying that he is going to be playing college basketball next season. That's the one thing, because there were some other options out there, whether you're talking about playing in the G League, playing internationally. He's decided he is going to go ahead and play college basketball next year. Not only that, but he's going to go ahead and go to USC. Just want to get your immediate thoughts on his commitment to USC as a program, and then kind of what you think this is going to do for his preparation as he tries to get himself ready to be an NBA player.
I think the first thing that really struck me was when LeBron Sr. was asked, and LeBron mentioned kind of how he was really proud of him for being the first person in the James household to go to college. I think it's like LeBron has done so much, obviously professionally, but also like philanthropically with, I think, is it the University of Akron? And then he's, he picks his teams. He's an Ohio State football fan. And so you kind of forget that he didn't go to college himself sometimes. And so I think it's so cool, that little tidbit. Like, you could kind of sense the proud dad moment. Like, I'm also a first generation college student, and like, once again, like, that doesn't always mean anything. Like, sometimes you kind of forget like the relevance of that, but very cool in his own right. I mean, I'm going to say, like, from a personal standpoint, we have 3 schools, not that Bronny was ever going to come to NC State, but we have 3 schools where I am, and being Duke, UNC, and NC State. And I know Duke was high up on the list, or at least it's reported to be high up on the list. And coming off of like the run that they just had, I mean, everyone really seems to love, that team that they have, the coaching transition away from Coach K and to Shire. Everyone who's a Duke basketball fan, that would not be myself, but people around the program, fans of the program around campus, they really seem to love him and love that program. That would have been real cool to see. And part of me wanted to see him like outside of like one of these major cities. Like obviously I think USC fits perfectly. There's going to be so much hype. He's going to have a ton of pressure on him, obviously. But if he goes to a school, not necessarily like a Duke or UNC, but I don't know, maybe some of the other names floated around, Kentucky and stuff like that, where like this sport is all that the residents of this town have and stuff like that. Like that's a lot of pressure. Also being LeBron James's son, also like just you've been clips of your AAU games when you're in 8th grade were going around on YouTube, and it's like just a lot to live up to. So I honestly think like USC, obviously the team did real well in their season last year. What did they lose in the first round of the tournament?
USC, they lost second round this past year.
Second round. So obviously they made the tournament, but could have been a little bit better for them. But I think like there's no worries about being a big man on campus. Like you have this super storied program, this big legacy. You have a lot of people doing other stuff, and I just feel like it's a really good fit.
Yeah, and I mean from a perspective that considers family, right? It's a perfect fit. LeBron is going to be in LA. He's going to be playing down the street from where his son is playing. I knew that there were really a big four, really, in my mind. I think it was Ohio State, USC, Oregon, and Duke. Those were the four schools that were like his final four. And there were real reasons for him to go to all four of those schools. Whether you're talking about the history that LeBron has with Coach K, and I'll put this tidbit in, a lot of reports and a lot of things that I've heard on social media say that if Coach K was still at Duke, that's where Bronny would have went, because LeBron himself would have had more influence to say, hey, this is the coach you need to be with. This is the coach that's going to prepare you for the next level. I trust him with everything there is. And that's the one unique thing, is that LeBron hasn't really had a strong relationship with any of his coaches. If you really think about all the coaches he's had, Mike Brown, Eric Spoelstra, Frank Vogel, Tyronn Lue. He has a decent relationship, I guess, with Tyronn Lue because they played in the NBA against each other at certain points, but he hasn't had, a close, like a father figure relationship with any of his coaches in the NBA. But he has had that in some situations with Coach K, because he's always said that his experience with playing in the Olympic qualifiers, playing with Team USA, has been like his experience for going to college, because he was able to kind of live with his teammates and only worry about basketball and not have media obligations and not have all these other things going on, sleeping in bunks and sleeping in things like that, when they're traveling kind of together as a one unit, has been something that he really looked forward to. And Coach K is the only person he ever experienced that with. So I think Bronny probably would have went there if Coach K was still there, but him not having a relationship with John Shire probably hurt their chances there. USC, I think, is a perfect fit because Andy Enfield is a guy that has a lot of experience when it comes to, dealing with high-profile, highly recruited players. Not necessarily to the ilk of a Bronny James, because there's only a few players that can experience what he's experienced in his young life so far. But you're in the entertainment capital of the world, really, when you think about it. And to be a college basketball team that's, in the shadows of the college football team, in the shadows of the Lakers, in the shadows of the Dodgers, that's a lot to compete with. But USC has, if people want to remember this, USC has had a very high-profile combo card come to USC as a surprise, and his name was O.J. Mayo. Now, people don't remember this because O.J. didn't necessarily turn out to have the great NBA career that a lot of people projected, but coming out of 8th grade, O.J. Mayo was the number one player in his graduating class. He was tabbed to be one of those, super ultra stars that could have gone straight from high school if the rule had not been changed at that time period. And so USC has had some experience with this before when you talk about high-profile players. It'll be really interesting to see how he transitions into the college game, because the college game is a lot more different than NBA game, which is obviously what his dad knows the most. when you talk about freedom of movement, when you talk about the emphasis on scoring, college basketball was a lot more defensive oriented. It's a lot more physical, even from a refereeing standpoint. So it'll be interesting to see how he adjusts. But the one thing I think that's going to allow him to be flourishing in this role is the simple fact that he's a great shooter. He's a better shooter than his dad. He's a better shooter than probably a lot of college players currently going in college basketball right now. So that's going to get him minutes, and that's going to allow him to have an opportunity to be on the floor when it counts most, I think, and that's going to start during his freshman year. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he does. And the one thing I will go ahead and warn USC fans about is if you are planning on going to some games, you better hurry up and get your tickets quick, because I'm sure they're going to be about twice as much as they were last season. That's 100% for sure.
I didn't realize he is I shouldn't say only, because I am the exact same height, but he's only 6'2".
He's listed at 6'3". He's probably somewhere between 6'2" and 6'3". So yeah.
I did not realize that. That's just a side note.
Absolutely. The one thing that he has is the genetics. He's got the athleticism that's just within his blood. He's an ultra athletic player. For anybody who hasn't watched him, just go and watch some highlights and you'll see kind of why some coaches and some scouts are really excited about what his potential could be. He's not the player that his dad was in high school, nor was probably 99.99999% of anybody that's ever played high school basketball when they compared themselves to LeBron James. But I think that he has a really good chance to be at a school where he's going to have a lot of spotlight. His games are going to be on national TV. He's going to have a chance to play in his freshman year. And if he's good enough, I think he has a chance to get drafted. A lot of other players get drafted on potential in the NBA as well. I think he can be one of those players. So we'll see where he goes from here. Transitioning over to college football, but staying in the Pac-12, we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders has been in the news for quite a while now, going back about 2 or 3 years from his time in transitioning to a head coach on the collegiate level, where he was able to go ahead and take Jackson State to, I believe it was 2 out of 3 conference titles during his 3 years at Jackson State, playing in the Southwestern Athletic Conference. He was able to parlay that opportunity after a 3-year coaching stint there to become the coach at the University of Colorado. T has talked about this a lot in previous videos, so no need to go through all of the hoopla of his transition. But the one big thing that has not really been talked about a whole lot since he's been there was that 26 players from last year's roster that were there in the spring, that played in the spring game, were either released or have decided to transfer. Just your immediate thoughts on some of the high turnover that's happened now that he's officially in and trying to make his roots planted there in Colorado.
I mean, my first thought is that he told us it was going to happen, right? Like, he sat everyone down in that initial meeting and he said, just because you were a starter last year doesn't mean you have a position on the team this year. And that's a really tough, abrasive way, like, to coach a football team. I don't know if I was going to coach any team, if I would be able to do something like that. But, I mean, that program needs a 180. It's been miserably bad for so long. And I don't know. There's a lot of people who've really spoken not too kindly about Deion lately. And it's that kind of discourse has always kind of weirded me out, because like yes, he's a flashy guy. Yes, he kind of sometimes comes off as like a main character, and that really rubs people the wrong way. But he very clearly got his team up like week after week at Jackson State, although they did lose to North Carolina Central over here in Durham, which was a crazy game. It's like
great game to watch,
really good game. But it's just like I don't understand. Like, you're not going to have these cookie cutter coaches anymore, as like the older generations kind of are phased out and newer generations. I mean, we're going to have like the Patriots. People are talking about Gerard Mayo possibly becoming the Patriots head coach. Not that I don't want to like default to the NFL, but I mean, Gerard Mayo is nothing like Bill Belichick. Does that mean he can't be a great coach? No. I will say, though, I saw the picture of him with that massive customized Ford truck. And I might be out, because that thing is in Boulder, Colorado, like the hippie capital of the world. He's going to get so much flack for it. The second he loses the game, people are going to be like, he's polluting the air. And no, I'm just kidding. I don't know. Look, I think like he told us what was going to happen, and it's happening. And I understand 100% if you are an athlete and you've committed to Colorado. And I know, chances are if you committed to Colorado, the league wasn't in your sights. Like for a large majority of that team, you probably just liked the school and something fit. Maybe it was academically, maybe it was just the culture. But look, like transfer portals and NIL and everything, like that is favoring the athletes now. And it's no longer the case where being a transfer is like devastating to your career. It's actually putting you in the driver's seat for the rest of your career. And so I have a hard time like really feeling too badly. He came out, he said this is what was going to happen. It's happening. I don't know. I hope like every single player lands on their feet. Like I truly do. I know that's tough. I know you transferred as an athlete. You could probably speak to it a little more directly, but I don't know. He's doing what he hasn't lied. There's no shade. There's no covering up anything. He's doing what he told us he was going to do.
Yeah. And I mean, the one thing I think the only issue that I have personally with how he's handled things so far since his time at Colorado really is probably two things. I think the introductory meeting that he had where he essentially said, hey, some of you guys are not going to be here at the start of the season. Some of you guys are going to be in that transfer portal. I think that that's a conversation that's fair to have, and I can respect the honesty. But I think that that's something he could have done off camera. I think if he wanted to do that off camera, that would have been fine. Or even better than that, I think that if he would have been able to do that after the spring game off camera, that probably would have been the best time to do that, because he does that the first day that he's coming into that team, and he hasn't really gotten a chance to study film or watch those guys practice or see what they can really do other than the players that played last year, because maybe he's watched some game tape of some of the players that he may want to retain. But, you're talking about 22 guys that start for you, and then you have a whole nother 40 to 50 kids that you have to consider whether you're going to have them on your roster next year. And the only thing you're going to have to go off of is how well they practice. But he didn't really give a lot of those kids, probably in their minds, the opportunity to do so. Hence why a lot of these kids, since that spring game happened about a month ago, have all been kind of trickling into the transfer portal and leaving, Colorado. So from that standpoint, that's the only thing that I have an issue with. But you're right. He was very honest. He was very open about, the process and what he expected to do. He expects and demands winning, and he expects and demands championships. I don't think that that's a reality for his team this coming season. But I think once UCLA and USC are in the Big Ten, I think people are going to really see why he decided to come to Colorado, because it's a sneaky thing there that he did. He didn't go to UCLA. He didn't go to a USC because both of those situations were kind of closed off. He didn't go to an SEC school. He didn't go to a Big Ten school. He went to a school in the Pac-12 that's still a very respected conference, but a conference that's going to become a lot easier to win in the next 2 or 3 years. So really, the Pac-12 very, very soon, and I know that my Pac-12 fans are not going to like this, the Pac-12 is probably going to become a sub-mid-major, not a sub-mid-major, but below the Power 5 conferences as we traditionally viewed them when you talk about the Big Ten, the SEC, the Big 12, the ACC, and the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is going to become one of those second-tier conferences very, very soon as far as college football is concerned, just because their best two most prominent programs, other than Oregon, are going to be leaving the conference here in the next couple of years. So, that's my thoughts on it. I think it'll be interesting to see. He's gotten a lot of high-level recruits to come in already, whether you're talking about, the 5-star corner that he recruited to come to Jackson State, his own son, who was a 4-star recruit out of high school. He also was able to get, I believe, a number 1 receiver. I believe the guy went to Alabama, and he was able to get him to transfer there. So, he's going to be able to get players to come there because of just his face, his charisma, and his ability to be different from all of the traditional power coaches that we've seen. A lot of these guys are going to give the similar pitch, and Deion Sanders is not that kind of a guy. He's going to be a little bit more relatable to a lot of these players. So it'll be really interesting to see what he does. Do you have any thoughts just in general on the selection of going to Colorado, and do you think that this is his final stop in the college game? Do you see him maybe moving to a more high-profile job within college, or do you think that this is something he's eventually going to want to parlay into an NFL job straight from Colorado?
That's a good question. I mean, I think that I can definitely see him bouncing to another college program eventually. But I do feel like, and this is just like gut feeling, not that I have really any like intuition on it, but I feel like he chose Colorado. First of all, they definitely gave him the keys, and they were definitely like, this is your program now. And I think there's a lot of programs you don't get to do that. You don't get to do that at Miami. You don't get to do that at like an Auburn. You don't get to do that at Mississippi State. And so I think that was probably attractive to him because he clearly got to do that at Jackson State, and it clearly worked out really, really well for him. I don't know. I guess I can see him coaching in the NFL, but not soon. And that's not anything to do with him. It's just the fact that like the NFL is very tough to crack right now. Particularly if you're a coach of color. And I just like, he's just abrasive enough where I feel like the league will do stuff power to be like, he's not the first one. He's not breaking through yet. We'll get someone who's a little less main character to give it a go around. But that's just like my personal opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I don't think that the NFL is at a point where they're ready for a high profile guy like himself to be a head coach. I think that they would, honestly, a lot of reporters, a lot of media, a lot of people wouldn't like the way that he operates. And unfortunately, that's just the reality of how some of the racial dynamics have sat within the NFL that still need a lot of progression. The NBA is on a strong path towards progression in that area. The NFL has done a decent job in that progression when you talk about quarterbacks, when you talk about coordinators, but head coaches and general managers and owners is still the part that the NFL needs to grow in. So I think that we'll see Deion Sanders eventually, possibly if he wants to be an NFL head coach. But I think it's just going to take a little bit more proving, because I think it's going to have to be a clear cut. You can't deny his success. He will have done this at 2 major college programs. And, you know, they hired the guy to be the head coach for the Panthers from Baylor after 1 good year at Baylor. I'm sorry, Matt Rule. I forgot his name, Matt Rule. And they fired him in 2 years. You know, they're on to a new coach now. So, you know, that just goes to show you that obviously these guys are willing to give unproven coaches from the college ranks an opportunity. It just has to be something that's quote unquote palatable for them. So we'll leave it there. Josh, thank you so much, man, for coming on the show. I really appreciate the time that you've been able to give me tonight. You guys can follow Josh at jsully27 on social media. You can check out all of the work that he where he's covering anything and everything social media platforms, sports, as well as some non-sports topics, Carolina and the East Coast region. So really appreciate the time, Josh. Thank you for coming on. For everybody else, thank you for showing up. Thank you for showing out, sharing our podcast, sharing our videos and our clips. We really appreciate the feedback. You guys have a good night. Thank you and good luck.